When we look at the map and we look at that southwest portion of our county.
And also, just for context for people who didn't see the last episode but are
Yeah.
listening right now, you said the 55 miles right below where you are and the border is basically no man's land. It's
Right.
got some Native American reservations, open desert and mountains.
Yep.
And so you guys are kind of the first line of defense in Arizona.
Right, right. So
Obviously, in Arizona, you've stated it has really been historically over the last couple decades the Sinaloa Cartel.
Right.
That's been the main threat there. Very famous cartel, given some of the media presence with regards to people like El Chapo and El Mayo who've been involved with that. And there's a lot going on today that's a little different. But, you know, when did you start to really get well-versed in the Sinaloa Cartel and how it works and how they operate in the United States and what they're doing?
that would have, the first touch of that would have been in the early 2000s when I first started working undercover, getting kind of introduced to that world. And it was kind of like the Matrix where, you know, I took the red pill or the blue pill, whichever the right pill is to see the world. But getting exposed to that bigger world and had a bigger understanding. So that was the first exposure where I saw the Sinaloans and started to learn about them. And then it became an OJT kind of thing. And a really good mentor was the guy who actually pulled me up to undercover work, right? The guy that I said sat me down and recruited me, and the same dude that said, it's your heart, not your look, right? So that dude was a big-time mentor of mine in the dope world, and he knew that world in and out, man. He had been operating in it for so many years, and he had done a lot of undercover work in that realm, and he taught me a lot. So he kind of started laying out how structured they were. And as we started moving forward in time from the early 2000s, like some of the first things that he laid out for me, he gives me a sheet of paper that has a bunch of frequencies on it, and frequencies and then GPS locations and stuff like that. And I'm like, all right, what are we looking at here? And he's like, these are the frequencies that they're currently operating on, and these are the locations where we found scouts. And I'll explain all of that. But essentially what he was showing me was their network of communication. And I was like, oh, okay. And so as we moved forward and he educated me more, he was like, essentially they have their own radio system, and they're on frequencies in the U.S., and they're talking back and forth to Mexico, and they're communicating up here. And these scouts are in the U.S., they're on mountaintops throughout our county, and they communicate to each other all the way back to Mexico to coordinate the load movement from Mexico up.
Now, how would they communicate?
They had Kenwood and Motorola radios, so typically Latin-based radios, much like a police radio. So if you look at your typical police radio, the cartel radios look very much like that. The easiest way to describe it for the lay person is a walkie-talkie, right? They had these black radios. They would. So when you go into Arizona, if you can pull that map up again, when we look at the map and we look at that southwest portion of our county.
And also, just for context for people who didn't see the last episode but are listening right now, you said the 55 miles right below where you are and the border is basically no man's land. It's got some Native American reservations, open desert and mountains.
Yep.
And so you guys are kind of the first line of defense in Arizona.
Right, right. So as you look at that area that you just described, which is open desert all the way down there, so south of I-8 and west of I-10, all open desert, and what it looks like is valleys and peaks. So you have these huge valleys with mountaintops spread throughout them, right? And so you can see for 30 miles in any direction when you're on one of these mountaintops. And so if you look from mountaintop to mountaintop, that would typically be where scouts were. And so they were communicating on these on one mountaintop to the other. They were communicating with each other and acting as their own repeater system. So Scout 1 talks to Scout 2 to 3, and they would repeat that message from I-8 all the way down to the boss in Mexico.
Are these kids, wives, or regular cartel members? Or a mix?
It's a mix, right? And the weird thing is this, that they're all cartel. right?
yeah.
Because they all work for the same organization. But some of these dudes would be irrigators during the day, cartel dude at night, right? And cartel operative is probably more of a proper term, because they weren't like, these guys wouldn't be out slicing people up or anything like that.
Right.
They were sitting on a mountaintop talking to a radio.
They're not made guys, effectively.
Right. They're worker bee. And so that was their communication method. And again, they would operate on multiple frequencies. And so we would learn how to listen to some of those frequencies. But as time went on, they got better and better and better at it. And so as we were talking about in the first episode, how did I see them change? They went from these very rudimentary smuggling techniques of just, hey, put it in a truck and drive it north, or put it on a person and have them hike it north, and don't hide it or anything. And then when it gets to this spot, just get it to the next spot for distribution. And then as you went forward, they started like, okay, let's coordinate this a little bit better. Now we have coordinated movements where you go from point A to point B. You have to check in. So-and-so knows about it, and you check in with them when you get there, and then it goes from that point to the next. Then it went to, okay, now we have a radio system, and we're going to do live checks. So you're going to take it from this point, and you're going to have live check-ins, and scouts are going to be over the top of you watching. So if somebody comes in, law enforcement usually, they can alert you to that fact, so you can hide from them and then work around it. And so then the communication piece started getting more advanced. So they went from open frequencies where you could just, we used to be able to just run a scanner, right? A police scanner. And I could sneak into the area, run a police scanner, and eventually they would talk, and boom, it would key up on that frequency. And I would know like, okay, that's the frequency they're talking on. So then we would dial in that frequency and listen to their open conversations. And of course it's in Spanish, but they would talk in code sometimes, even on these open frequencies. And so you kind of have to figure that piece out. But you would eventually start figuring it out. And then they moved forward, advancing it further. They started using encryption. And so they would have those same radios, but they would be encrypted. And so you would have to figure out the encryption piece.
Wait, how would they, what do you mean encryption with radios?
So the radios they have the ability to have an encryption key, right? And so if I have two radios, they both have to have the same encryption key to talk to each other.
Yeah.
If they don't, you can't hear or communicate. And anybody on the outside, you'll never hear that transmission. It's almost like a WhatsApp of radios, right? Whoa. And so it's end-to-end encryption. And so that was their next step up in technology, was encryption. But that encryption wasn't hard to break if you knew what you were doing, right? And so on the government side, we had people that knew what they were doing, and we would still be able to listen to some of those. Then they moved to rolling encryption, which means that those keys now constantly switch. And so it's a rolling key that you can't really capture as easily. Then essentially you have to have that encryption key to really get after it and get that information. I know that's driving you crazy.
Yeah. Again, if you didn't hear the last episode, we're dealing with construction next door. We've been dealing with it only for 4 months.
Yeah. But it's weird because it's all good, dude. I just feel like every time I get to a key piece of intel information, those dudes start banging.
That's what I'm saying.
Right?
That's a little confusing. Although that one story you were telling, I was telling you this off camera, the one story you were telling about like going into the safe house and thinking the whole place was like booby trapped.
Right.
And you hear like go, go, go. They were doing the banging and it sounded like very on brand. I was like, okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
Give me more.
Right.
But other than that,
they've been off on the rest of it. Yeah.
Thank you guys for watching the episode. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and smash that like button on the video. They're both a huge, huge help. And if you would like to follow me on Instagram and X, those links are in my description below.